scream. They didn't fight. One day, they just stopped telling each other the truth. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any breakup ever could. From the outside, their life still looked perfect. They wore matching outfits to rooftop brunches, posted soft-filtered photos with easy smiles, and moved through the city like a couple who had figured everything out. Friends admired them, families trusted them, and strangers quietly envied the life they displayed. But inside their apartment, something had shifted. Conversations became short, careful, and strangely polite. The kind of politeness that belongs between strangers, not lovers who once shared everything, even the messy thoughts that didn't make sense yet. She noticed it first. The small lies, the delayed replies, the way he smiled at his phone longer than he smiled at her. At first, she questioned it silently, replaying moments in her head, trying to convince herself she was overthinking. But deep down, she recognized the change. It wasn't loud or obvious, it was subtle, almost invisible, but it was real. He noticed too, though in a different way. He saw her becoming quieter, more independent, less curious about his movements. She stopped asking where he was or who he was with, and instead of worrying him, it relieved him. Less pressure, fewer questions, fewer expectations to meet. So they both made the same unspoken decision to keep things calm. No confrontation, no uncomfortable conversations, just peace. But it wasn't real peace. It was silence disguised as stability, slowly replacing the connection they once had. They still shared a bed, but their thoughts lived in different worlds. Nights became routine. Lights off, backs turned, each lost in private reflections they didn't dare to speak out loud. Their story hadn't always been like this. They met in the city, in the middle of fast lives and endless ambition. She was sharp and focused, building her career step by step with quiet confidence. He was charming and driven, the kind of man who spoke about big dreams with convincing energy. Together, they built something that felt bigger than love. It was a lifestyle, a partnership, a shared identity that made sense in a city where appearances often carried weight. They moved into a modern apartment, split responsibilities, and created a life that looked like success. But somewhere along the line, they stopped feeling what they were performing. Their happiness became something to maintain rather than something to experience. The shift didn't come through a dramatic event. It came through missed calls, postponed plans, and emotions left unexplored. She responded by investing more in herself, her work, her confidence, her independence. She built a version of her life that didn't depend on him being present. He, on the other hand, started staying out longer. He called it work, called it pressure, called it responsibility, but really it was distance. The first real lie was small. He said he was working late, but laughter in the background told a different story. She heard it, she understood it, but she didn't confront him. Instead, she adjusted. She lowered her expectations, softened her questions, and stopped placing emotional weight on his answers. He noticed the change and, surprisingly, felt comfortable with it. The relationship became easier to manage even as it became less real. Then she met someone at work. It wasn't planned and it wasn't immediately romantic. It was simply attention. Honest, present attention that she hadn't felt in a long time. Someone who listened when she spoke, who asked questions without hesitation. She didn't cross any clear lines, but emotionally, something shifted. She started keeping parts of her life separate, untouched by the relationship she still officially belonged to. At home, the distance grew quietly. He stopped asking about her day, and she stopped offering details. They both became careful, hiding phones, choosing words, avoiding topics that might lead to uncomfortable truths. It wasn't that they didn't notice what was happening, they did, but acknowledging it felt more dangerous than ignoring it. So they protected the silence. Friends still called them perfect. They still showed up together, still smiled in photos, still played their roles convincingly. But inside, the connection had thinned to something fragile and barely recognizable. The distance didn't feel like conflict. It felt like absence. The kind of absence that doesn't leave visible damage, but changes everything. One night, they sat together longer than usual. The room was quiet, but heavy with things unsaid. They both felt it. That moment where something needed to be spoken. She almost said it. He almost admitted it. But fear and pride held them back. Fear of confirming what they already felt. Pride that refused to admit failure. And just like that, another opportunity passed. The breaking point didn't come with drama. It came on an ordinary day when neither of them had the energy to pretend anymore. That night, they finally spoke, but not about everything. Just enough. Enough to expose the distance. Enough to reveal the truth they had both been avoiding. "Are you happy?" she asked. It was a simple question, but it carried everything. He paused, and in that pause, she understood. The silence answered more honestly than words ever could. They didn't argue. They didn't end things dramatically. They simply stopped pretending. And somehow, that was the real ending. Not a breakup, not a final goodbye. Just an unspoken understanding that what they had was no longer real. In the days that followed, nothing changed on the surface. They still lived in the same space, still interacted politely, still maintained appearances where necessary. But internally, everything had shifted. The connection was gone. The intimacy was gone. What remained was familiarity without meaning. Eventually, she moved on. Not quickly, not easily, but honestly. For the first time in a long while, she chose clarity over comfort. He stayed longer than he should have, holding on to what was already gone, realizing too late that silence doesn't protect relationships, it replaces them. Because relationships don't always end with arguments or goodbyes. Sometimes they end in quiet spaces, in withheld truths, in conversations that never happen. Sometimes the breakup doesn't happen at all. They just stop being real. And maybe that's the hardest ending of all.